player at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and the football player didn't show up, and he had to wait. So his plane was arriving in Nashville at 6:30. We're going to start dinner without him. I would like to call on Dr. Meredith, President of Western Kentucky University, to offer greetings at this point.
Thank you, Joanne. Welcome to all of you. This is really a special event, and our congratulations and thanks go to the Deers and for all of the work that they have done to make this possible, and for so many of you who have been contributors. And then, of course, congratulations to all of you who are recipients of the awards that we're talking about tonight, as well as the scholarship. So congratulations to all of those. We're very proud of this program. We're proud of the effort that is made in terms of minority journalists and adding to the number who are practicing in this country. And that when you're in the very best program there is, and then we are offering that kind of opportunity for producing more minority journalists, that means we're going to produce more of the best, so that just makes it easier on people like me who get interviewed every day. No, I'm just kidding. But we're delighted that you're here, and know that this will be a great evening. I'm looking forward to meeting more of you than I've seen so far. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to call on Jim McDaniels to offer the invocation.
Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus. We thank you, Father, for this wonderful evening and for the young people who are receiving these awards, Father, and for the contributors, Father. And Father, we pray for Western Kentucky University. We pray, Father, as we have our young people who are going to be leaders in the 21st century, Father. We pray for the journalism department. Father, I'm so honored to be here tonight to be a part of this whole evening, Father. Father, we thank you for the food that we're about to receive for nourishment of our bodies. And we just thank you, Lord, for being here tonight. And Father, we ask a hedge of protection around everyone here tonight, and we just pray for every person here under the sound of my voice, Father, that who knows you and who don't know you, that we will come to know and depend upon you in a real and mighty, powerful way. Again, Father, I just pray for Western Kentucky University, wonderful university, and thank you for the many young people that's come through here in the future, and the young people that are coming through here. And I just thank you in Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Okay, we have two food lines set up, and we'll sort of divide the room here, and if we could start with the tables in the first row to go that way, and you all probably get your choice of which direction you want to go. We're going to move forward with our program. I was tempted to issue magnifying glasses with the program. Now, I want to tell you, Wilma King designed these, and she did not say you wrote too much copy. I wrote the copy, and as a good designer, she did it with the copy that I prepared. But inside the program is our schedule of our order for the evening. We're going to have introductions. We had listed it introduction of speakers table. The speakers table was getting larger and larger and larger, and we would have had half the room almost at the speakers table, and we decided to eliminate a speakers table. So I'm going to introduce some people from the university, and then I'm going to call on Walt Deer to introduce people from Henderson. Well, I'm going to stretch that a little bit because I did want to introduce a couple other people who are here and who are not from Henderson. At the table with Dr. Meredith is Dr. Barbara Birch. I would like to introduce Dr. Birch. She's our new academic vice president. This is her first year here, though she was at Western as an undergraduate. And we are delighted to have her with us tonight. She is putting off going to a very important wedding in order to be with us, and I think that's really something that we appreciate. I wanted to introduce Ed Statz, who is sitting back here. Ed Statz is bureau chief for the Associated Press in Louisville. Fred Hensley, where is Fred sitting? Okay, Fred Hensley is vice president for institutional advancement. And Howard Bailey, Dean Bailey, is over here. Dean Bailey is Dean of Students at Western. Dean David Lee is my dean, my boss. Everybody be nice to him. He's a nice man who deserves being nice to. But Dean Lee is Dean of the Potter College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, in which the Department of Journalism is lodged. Did I overlook a vice president? I don't think I did. Okay. And I would really like to introduce David Whitaker, who is just taking a sip of water. I caught him at the absolute worst time. But David Whitaker was Director of Student Publications at Western, was the first department head of the Department of Journalism, my predecessor, and someone from whom I've learned a lot. And we're delighted that he is here tonight. Mr. Deere, would you come?
Now, are we in the frozen peas section, or is that produce over there? This used to be the Kroger building. We're going to wait until Tommy George comes, so we'll have frequent restroom breaks. But we're going to wait because this guy is a star. There are a lot of stars, and I want to introduce you to some of the stars from Henderson, Kentucky. I want to start with Clara Harrelson. Come over here. Come on. I got a story to tell you about Ms. Harrelson. She, her son broke into the business as a, was it your son that wanted to play the drums? Is that right? Did he want to play the drums? All right, the story about Gary Harrelson, who came to Western. This is Clara Harrelson. She's a shrewd cookie. My deal with her is that if she wrote out a check for dinner tonight. Don't tell that.
No.
Well, but we did that.
I'm in enough trouble out there.
No, but it's a nice story.
Okay.
All I'm going to tell. Can I go ahead and tell it?
Yes.
Yeah. She wrote out a check, very legitimate, to Western Kentucky University Foundation for supper, $28. And I said, if you'll just go on and sell a few tickets, why you come eat supper for free. And look, she's got a table full of people over there. She is a Western promoter. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
now tell them, they pay for the tickets.
Yes, I know they
Okay.
pay for it. Absolutely. Now, let me tell you the story about her son, Gary. Gary is a Henderson native, and he broke into the business as a photographer at the Henderson Gleaner. But before that, in high school, he had a notion that he was going to become the Gene Krupa of the 70s. Gene Krupa, as some of you young folks might not know, was an incredibly talented drummer. Right. And somehow or other, the Harrelsons got together $3,000 big dollars for some drums. Gary, where are you? Are you? I think it's true.
It is.
And then all of a sudden, just after they'd purchased these drums, someday you're gonna have to tell me about that. He decided that cameras would be better. So the good news is he sold the drums and got the cameras, and the rest is history. So we're mighty proud to have this incredible family from Henderson represented tonight. Why don't you just introduce some of your friends and neighbors and relatives over there? I don't remember everybody.
All right. My daughter, Patrice Harrelson, she's a social worker at State Hospital in Evansville, Indiana.
All right. Stand up.
Stand up, Patrice.
Yeah. Okay.
My oldest son, Reverend Donald Owens, he's the minister, associated minister at the New Jerusalem Baptist Church. Who else is over there? Lemire Price, he's a friend of the family's. He's a student, graduate from Murray State University.
Okay. Murray State?
Yes.
It's okay tonight.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
No, it's okay. They're good people then.
But I don't want to leave my little grandson and his mother, my daughter-in-law, sweet Gary's wife, Shalita Harrelson, and little Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. How you doing? Yeah.
Now, is that all? May I sit down?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Let's give some. Oh. Now I want to. Let's see. There's a fellow here who went to Western. I believe that's right. And his name is Kim Terry. And this is a very emotional story because Kim Terry is now the circulation route manager for the Henderson Gleaner. And he told me a while ago that he'd always wanted to work for the Henderson Gleaner. And by golly, we are very, very proud that he's on board with us and doing one fine job. Kim, would you please stand up and be recognized? And he's a Western graduate. Make no mistake about that. And his wife, Faye, is nearby. There's Faye, yeah. Okay, also here from Henderson is the vice president of the Kentucky chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and his name is Tom Platt. Let me tell you a little bit about Tommy Platt. Tom has had a number of careers. He served with distinction in the United States Army in the military police section. Then he developed another career as a significant person at the Earl Clements Job Corps near Morganfield, Kentucky. And now he serves all of mankind. Tom, would you please rise and be recognized? With him tonight is Dorothy Black, who is the treasurer of the Black History Group in Henderson, Kentucky, and they have made a very nice contribution to this scholarship fund. Let's hear it for Dorothy, yeah. And there's another branch of the Harrelson family in a way, and that's Midge Greenwell. Midge, would you please be recognized? Yeah. Okay. Now we got some newspaper folks from Western Kentucky here today. Steve Austin and his wife Pam. Steve is the publisher of the Henderson Gleaner and a former president of the Kentucky Press Association. Steve, please stand up. Yeah. There's a fella here who's he does have some Murray State connection, Darrell, but it's okay. You know. His heart is with Western because Western has made him a happy fella as he has hired through the years some distinguished graduates of the J School here. Ron Jenkins, editor of the Henderson Gleaner, please take a bow. Okay. Now I want to forgive me, but I've got a little idol worshiping to do it, but I'm proud. There's a fella in this room tonight who you've already heard from, and I never met him before, and I stand here in awe and admiration. Now I'm a little fella. Would you kindly stand up, preacher? Yeah. There are many thrills in my life tonight, but this is one of them, I'll tell you. But when I saw him play, I believe you had a little more hair, didn't you?
A little more hair and a few less pounds.
Yeah. Now, Jim, would you just tell them a little bit about what happened in 1971 and how Western Kentucky University was in the hearts and minds of Americans all over the country? What was that all about? There's some people that may not know what you know.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about it. I'm from Scottsville, Kentucky. We play a little basketball up there, and we had several of our athletes are from Glasgow, Horse Cave, and different places in the state of Kentucky. We had a chance to make a mark in basketball, and our goal when we came to Western was to win a national championship. Several of us came together and said, let's all go to Western Kentucky. We were all stars. 6 out of 7, we all came to Western Kentucky with one goal in mind. We knew we'd beat each other up if we played against each other. We were smart enough to learn to play together and come to Western. It was a wonderful experience to come to Western. I remember Coach Diddle. I tell people every morning I wake up some mornings to go to school, it'd be Coach Diddle or Johnny Olam or someone at my door saying come to Western Kentucky, I finally got in my mind that I think Western wanted me real bad. And I was really drawn to Western Kentucky. But in 1971, we had a wonderful basketball team, and we had a chance to play at the University of Kentucky. We watched them all year long, and we said if we get a chance to play those guys, we really believe we can beat them. They were on television more than we were at that time. We were on quite often. And we really did finally get a chance to show that Western Kentucky University could play some basketball. And that's one of the greatest memories, I think, for me and for the community around here. And another good friend of mine, we had a chance to beat up on 7'2" Artis Gilmore. We had a chance to play against him 2 out of 3 times at Western Kentucky and beat him. I saw him at the Final Four last year in the NCAA tournament. And he said, Jim, it's good to see you, and it's good that we don't have to go to war with each other. So we were hugging each other, and it was very nice. But that basketball team we had was a wonderful team. We have our Final Four rings. Thank you, Dr. Meredith. We appreciate that. I came along at a time, Dr. Downey, I thank you very much. And I want to say here today, in front of everyone, I love you very much. Thank you. When I came to Western, I was a kid that came here with cardboard in my shoes, but I had a dream to get an education and be a basketball player. I'm glad I had the opportunity to come to Western Kentucky University. And for you young people, this is a fine university. We need leaders for the 21st century, and I think we have some fine leaders here. And I think Western Kentucky is a fine place to come to go to school. I'm proud to be an alumni of Western Kentucky University. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a young lady here who's been my sweetheart. Martha, say hello. And the reason, and there's some other sweet people here, and their names are Harriet and Dero Downing, and we've gotten to know them real well. They're responsible for us. Let me tell you, he's got a brother who grew up in Horse Cave, Kentucky, and this brother got on the plane and went up to Chicago to become an optician. And one summer many years ago, many years ago, he got on one of those cheap flights to Paris, France, and never came back. So Dero Downing said, then we go on a bike, we went on a bike ride in the southern part of France several years ago, and he said, now you want to meet my brother, and you meet him there promptly at 11:30. And as we got into this wee little bitty town of Minerbes, France, we saw a fella up on the hill, and he had bib overalls on, and I believe he had a red kerchief and a funny-looking hat, and it was his brother Joe Downing, who's an artist. And let me tell you about Joe Downing. Joe Downing is a very gifted guy. He's really hot in Luxembourg and France and Bowling Green, Kentucky, and he had a heart problem, and he had a heart attack, and it was a terrible thing. He thought he was going to die, and they had an ambulance, Tommy, come by to get him, and they conveyed him into the ambulance, and before they shut the door, he looked out and looked up in the sky, and he said to me, he said the colors were just about right. I said, well, I'll never forget that story. I said, so Dero Jim has enriched my life and Martha's life as well, and we're very proud to be associated with them in this endeavor, and we kind of started off this thing. I'm not going to tell you about the results of this thing until Tommy George comes. We may be here till 2 o'clock, so if anybody has to go to the restroom, they're over there on the left. Bob Ashley is here representing the Owensboro Messenger Inquirer. He's the editor. Welcome, Bob. Good to see you. And let's see, we've got a delegation from Franklin, Kentucky. And Mayor, would you come up here for just a minute, please? The mayor of Franklin, Kentucky. He's the only. Are there any other elected officials here? This is Mayor Bill Gentry. I wonder if you would bring greetings from the community of Franklin to this wonderful group.
I, too, am a graduate of Western Kentucky University. And one of the finest hours that I can ever remember in sports was watching this gentleman play ball. I graduated in 1968 from Western, and I'm very proud of it. I think, too, it is a wonderful school, a very fine school, or I would not have sent my 2 daughters here. One graduated in 92, 91, and you have one now who is a senior this year. I didn't expect to be up here, but I do bring you greetings from the city of Franklin, Kentucky. We're a small town of 8,000 wonderful souls trying to make our way through life and be as kind and loving to each other as we can, and sometimes we fail at that. And I hope God will forgive us in those times that we don't meet his expectations. Mr. Deere, I think you have a wonderful program, sir. I didn't realize until I actually had to take my glasses off to read this. But I admire you. Thank you for your contribution. And now that you've thoroughly embarrassed me, I'll sit down.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
What I actually wanted to do is to, thank you, Mayor. What I actually wanted to do is to talk about the head of the family, Betty Gentry. Betty, would you please rise and be recognized? She is the advertising director for the Franklin Favorite. There's no other newspaper in America by that name. Now, is it, where is Mrs. Portman, Charles? Yeah, okay. Charles Portman is our editor, and it's Wanda. Wanda, would you please rise? She's the busy telephone receptionist for FKN and the Franklin Favorite. Hi, Frank. Wanda. Okay, thank you. I think they've had enough. Okay, I'll just leave this here.
To our individuals that would want, as they launch their professional awards program. Practitioners in Kentucky and contiguous states. We didn't want this to be just a Kentucky award. And maybe most of you know that Kentucky is the state that is touched by more states than any other. So there are 7 states that touch Kentucky. So this award, with this award, we were soliciting nominations from 8 states. Have some small displays that offer some examples of their work. Unfortunately, 2 of the individuals could not be here personally to receive the awards, but we've got a videotape on one of them, and we have persons representing both of them. So we're going to start alphabetically with our majors. So advertising goes first, and Carolyn Stringer, who is followed Mike Morse, who is coordinator of the photojournalism major. Mike Morse will be followed by Jim Highland, who is coordinator of the print major, and John Barnum, who is coordinator of the public relations major, will follow that, and they're just going to right along. Carolyn.
The recipient of the 1996 Advertising Practitioner of the Year Award is Susan Bandy, a part advertising agency of Bandy, Carroll, and Halage in Louisville. Susan began her in 1986 and joined Bond Advertising. Later, she and her which ranked in the top 20 Metro 100 fastest growing companies in Kentucky. Has for the wrong program for middle children. Susan's accomplishment is impressive, but I think most important for copyright that the team is full of fresh faces. Susan does what many agencies refuse to even for people right out of school.
That I accept Western Kentucky University's 1996 Advertising Practitioner of the Year Award. You know, it's a particular honor to me because of our agency's commitment to always hiring the best possible talent that's available. And that includes hiring many individuals every year in their very first advertising job. So we're able to do this by the virtue of the talent pool that's being generated by universities such as Western Kentucky. To you, we are grateful. Mary Long, who's with me tonight on my behalf, is a perfect example. Mary, in fact, began with us, the youngest copywriter producer we've ever hired, and is a recent graduate of Western. You know, it's a recognizable star quality, and it's enormous potential. That's the essence of what we're looking for when we are looking for top talent. So I thank you tonight, not only for this award, but for Mary as well. The only other thoughts I'll leave you with tonight is wherever your career path takes you, just make sure you're having fun along the way. I always promise my clients that when I'm not having fun anymore, or when I've lost the passion for the business, that I'll resign their account. Because let's face it, if we're not having fun, we're not motivating anybody, and that is in fact advertising's foremost job. So many thanks again to the Western Kentucky Ad Club. I look forward to meeting you on Wednesday personally. And good night, everyone. God bless.
The Advertising Club is visiting her next week. And here to accept the award is Mary Long, a 1994 graduate of the advertising program who works for Susan.
But on thank you very much.
Carol, computer, she had all of her. I found it's a pleasure to, this is a great thing that we're doing here, I think, to honor some of those folks who have changed lives in our industry. You know, in your work life, you can do a lot of things. You can work real hard, and you can be real smart, and you can do a lot of good things, but if you don't work for someone who is a good leader and somebody who understands how to bring out the best in you, all of your efforts can often go in vain. The person that to be the recipient of the Photojournalism Practitioner of the Year is somebody who has built the careers of those around him and therefore has created a huge success for himself. But everybody that works for Bob Lynn goes with him, and there is a tremendous amount of respect in our industry. He is the AME graphics at the Norfolk Virginian Pilot. He's been there since 1980, and before that he worked at places like the LA Times, the Charleston Gazette, and the Cincinnati Enquirer, other great newspapers, for 14 years. He graduated from Marshall University with a degree in journalism, BA, and also an MA from Ohio University. We won't hold that against you, Bob, actually, but one of our great competitors. But he went to Ohio University a little later in his, got his MA, and he's just one of the great. He's often in demand. I mean, he talks to, he is, I don't know where he finds all the energy to do this, but this year alone, he's been a week-long teacher at the Stan Kalish Workshop, which is a photo editing workshop at Northwestern. He's also always puts on a very, very fine management and editing seminar at the Northern Short Course on Photojournalism. This week this year he spent 6 weeks at the Singapore Straits Times, coaching and consulting with them. And also last spring he came to Western for a week to help our students. And I've never had anybody come here and work as hard as he did day and night to help the students. And again, today he's here to receive an award, but spent about 3 or 4 hours just looking at portfolio. This year has been sort of an interesting year for him. He's won many awards himself, and he's won many awards for the paper with the help of his staff. As a matter of fact, in 1981 and 1989, the Virginian Pilot won Best Use of Pictures from the Pictures of the Year competition. But they won that award again this year. And not only that, they won the highly coveted Angus McDougall Award for Overall Excellence in Editing, which is one of the top awards in our whole industry. Bob will be retiring this year, at the end of this year, and becoming a consultant. So it seems fitting also to recognize him on the eve of his departure from the daily and maybe starting to do some things that he wants to do on a personal level. So I want to say, Bob, you're a great industry person. You've cultivated and helped people build their careers, and we want to recognize you for all the fine work that you've done in our business. Bob Lynn.
I paid Mike to say all those nice things about me. Is this plagiarism? Right, so I owe you. Well, let me get these. You'd think with all this speaking and talking that one would get used to this, but somehow it just doesn't seem to happen. I accept this award in all great humbleness and humility. Actually, I have won some awards, but it's normally the paper and with other people, and maybe for pictures I've shot earlier in my career, and for certain specific. But actually, this is the first such award individually like this I've received, and I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the whole thing. I would like to say, and to win this award from Western Kentucky University and this program, which I consider pound for pound the best photojournalism program in the United States. And having said that, then we might as well make it the world, because I don't think anybody elsewhere in the world touches the American photojournalism. This is an individual award, but really I feel in a fuller sense it affirms not really so much me, it's not really so much for me, but it's what I've always believed in as far as management and a philosophy that maybe what I've felt and tried to do was right, and it has had some success, and that makes me feel very good, more for that than really I think for myself. I feel like if excellence is your aim as a manager, the way you treat people is really the way you gain that success. But early on, management was the last thing I wanted to be involved with. I went through some interesting times, and I'll just mention a few. Some are management of question, but the first paper I worked for, I was a sports writer for the Wilmington Morning Star in North Carolina, and I worked for them for 9 months, and it seemed to terminate about the time that my boss, the sports editor, who was not the person who hired me, had made promises to me, and then seemed to renege on them, and we got into a little debate on the exactly what this was all about, and the managing editor was there, and I think my job went out the window when he denied that he had made certain promises to me, and I said, well, you're a lying son of a bitch. And but moving right on, I luckily 2 days later I get a telegram, if you can imagine that, from the San Gabriel Valley Tribune in California that I'd sent a letter to several months earlier. So somebody does provide. And so my wife and I packed up the old station wagon, and it just barely got us to California. And I lasted at the San Gabriel Valley Tribune for 3 months. And my boss, well, he couldn't stand, he couldn't abide by my creative and imaginative spelling ability. And so we kind of agreed to disagree. And then I went on to other places. But just in management, I can remember things. The next paper was the Pomona Progress Bulletin there in California, where I was a writer and a photographer. And I can remember having one encounter with the city editor where he could not understand how I could have shot 2 whole rolls of 35 millimeter film, 72 frames, mind you, when I could have shot 10 4x5 frames. I mean, that was some of the management there. At the LA Times, I can remember my boss jumping on me. I had a 5 assignment day, and I came in to take a break, and he didn't understand that, and so that led to a slam door. And the next day we had a big encounter, and he was going to talk to me, and we did talk. He talked to me. He got in about 5 minutes worth out of the hour and 15 minutes, and we kind of turned him around there, and he became a good friend. And but anyway, all through the years, all of us have seen a lot of bad or questionable management that you have to wonder, are these people trying to get the best out of people, or are they really trying to discourage them and get the worst out of them? So for me, it was finally, after about 18 years, that's the last thing I ever want to get into. And then it was, well, if I ever got into management, a little voice started speaking to me. Maybe I think I'd do it this way or that way. And these were really crazy, radical ideas like treat people like you'd like to be treated, believe in people and they'll believe in themselves, trust people and they'll return that trust. And all of this just common sense, which unfortunately sometimes is not as common as it should be. So that's what I feel good about. I think people, and you hire people. There's one term I use, and hey, it's kind of corny, but I hire people that not only have hopefully great talent, but who are people of good heart, and I think that's part of the success. And if this award means that philosophy is affirmed, then I accept it with great gratitude. Thank you very much. Mike, here we go.
I would just like to add that it's about everybody wants to see.
It's my pleasure tonight to recognize the Print Journalist of the Year. And that gentleman is Al Cross, the political writer for the Courier-Journal. Al has, I've known Al now, he was here when I got here. So that tells you a little something about how old I am. And, but we started out together and he became one of the charter members of the Society of Professional Journalists chapter when we established it here several years ago. And during that period of time, he also served as editor of the College Heights Herald and was also the advertising manager of the paper, and he also served in student government. He is a graduate of Clinton County High School and obviously a graduate of Western Kentucky University. He was editor of the Reporter in Monticello in 1975, assistant managing editor of the Logan Leader and the News Democrat at Russellville in 1975 to 77, and editor of the Litchfield Gazette and the Grayson County News Gazette in 1977-78. He began work for the Courier-Journal at the South Central Kentucky Bureau in Somerset in May 1978, covering Richard Nixon's visit to Hyden that summer. He moved with the Bureau to Bardstown in '79 when it became the Central Kentucky Bureau, and he covered the visit of President Carter. He began covering the General Assembly in 1980, and since that time he's been involved in not only coverage of the General Assembly, but almost every gubernatorial election since that period of time. Cross worked on the 1988 bus crash coverage that won the Courier-Journal a Pulitzer Prize in 1989. He was co-recipient of an honorable mention for environmental reporting in the Southern Journalism Awards for 1987 series on strip mining. One of the things that I think is fairly significant, he's currently the national chair of the Dog Committee for the Society of Professional Journalists, and this is an effort to engage the public in dialogue about the proper role of the news media in a free and democratic society. Now, what that means is that occasionally we have to stand up for the First Amendment. People forget sometimes forget what the Constitution says, and we find ourselves reminding them of it, and at the same time trying to build support for our newspapers and our radio and television stations. His letter of nomination was written by David Hobb, and David said, "Al Cross knows the texture of rural Kentucky life with the strands of family, religion, inbred schools, small-scale agriculture, county seat commerce, courthouse politics. The glory and the folly of ordinary life in rural Kentucky is something Al knows, like he knows the shape and gestures of his own hands." In another interesting, says he dismisses editors who bother him on deadline because his story is more important than their prattle. But he prattles editors into submission when he thinks journalistic principle is involved. He insists on enough time and enough space to do the job right, and he pretty nearly always thinks he's right. I think Patty would agree with that. Anyway, Al Cross is a distinguished gentleman, a very good friend of ours. He has supported us in many, many projects. I can't say enough about him. I give you our Kentucky Print Journalist of the Year, Al Cross.
In accepting this award, I first must thank the journalism department and Western as a whole, not just for this award, but for putting me on the path to it. When I arrived here in 1971, I only had a vague idea of what I wanted to make of myself, or what I should try to make of myself. But I soon found plenty of opportunities on this wonderful campus, beginning Howard Bailey at Pierce Ford Tower in the fall of '71. Remember that? I think Howard ran that dormitory the first semester it was open, and I was there. But I really found opportunities at the College Heights Herald. It was Bob Adams, I guess, who saw some potential in me and got me a job on the paper. He was the first person who really taught me how to write a story and put out a newspaper. He was more than an advisor, he was a friend and still is. I owe him a lot, and I know that many others who have worked at the Herald can say the same thing. The person who really whipped me into shape as a journalist was the fellow a lot of us call the boss, David B. Whitaker. Now that 2 decades have passed, I don't think he would mind me telling you that at least one person who had considerable influence on this campus at the time did not want me to be editor of the Herald. And Dave Whitaker stood up to that pressure. He waited until that person was no longer with us to tell me that, but when I heard the story, it told me nothing new about him. When I was editor, he always stood up for the paper, the staff, the journalism program, and good journalism. It wasn't always easy on a campus where the administration occasionally had laid a heavy hand on student journalists, and I would thank Dr. Downing for putting an end to that. At the same time, Dave Whitaker helped a young, impressionable editor understand the administrative and academic environment in which we were working, and that was a marvelous education, not just for journalism, but for life itself. I also want to say thanks to Jim Highland, who joined the faculty while I was a student and introduced me to SPJ, then known as Sigma Delta Chi. We've had a lot of fun at conventions and other SPJ meetings, but I think we've also done some good for journalism. Jim Highland's influence is one reason that I carve out time for SPJ. My longest professional association has been with Al Smith, who published papers in this area and gave me the experience I needed to get the job I have today. We remain close, and although he couldn't be here tonight because he's doing comment on Kentucky, I did want to express my thanks for all the help that he's given me. I'd also like to thank the Courier-Journal for giving me one of the best jobs a reporter can have covering Kentucky politics, and say a special thanks to David Haupt for nominating me. I feel particularly honored to be the first recipient of this award and feel sure that you will find others more worthy in the future. The person who deserves my thanks every day is my wife, Patty. Time and again, especially during election season like the one we're in now, she gets the short end of the stick. And I get snowed under by the campaigns, and I'll never be able to fully make up all the time that we could have spent together. So I wanted you and her to know how much I appreciate her advice and support. And I thank you all.
Good evening. I'm John Barnum, the head of the public relations sequence here, and it's my honor to make this our first award for the Public Relations Practitioner of the Year. When we were looking over who we would like to make it some nominations and get interested in this, we kind of set a set of criteria we wanted to look at. We decided first we wanted, for the first one, we wanted to have somebody that was an alumni of Western Kentucky University. Find somebody that was a real role model for our students. We wanted to find somebody that was recognized throughout the area as a real leader in public relations, and we wanted somebody that was well known to the faculty and the alumni in the area. We selected Kevin Granger. Kevin Granger graduated about 10 years ago from our program. He went to work in the Louisville market. He went up and started working in the hospitals and working with hospital administration and public relations for the hospitals. He was very successful and had worked in a number of hospitals, including Alliant and Ford Memorial across the river. He did what we all wanted to do in public relations, and this is the reason we selected him for this year's award. He went out and started his own agency about a year ago. And kind of the dream of everybody that has had to do public relations inside corporations or not being the real boss, to finally have your own organization. The students really kind of appreciate this, and so we were looking for somebody like this. He started his own agency and was going great guns, and was kind of disappointed though, because what had happened was he ended up working for the same people he'd always been working for, kind of at agencies. Forgot because he was too busy, again, staying in the healthcare administration. March, he got a phone call inviting him to come up to Milwaukee, that he then gave up his agency because he got a very interesting job. He went up to be the brand manager and public relations person for Miller Lite. That lasted about a month when they promoted him to being the head of the promotion efforts for all the Miller Brewing Company brands. And that's where he is tonight. He's in Los Angeles and was unable to be here. I'm not sure that the beer didn't have some influence on the students, though, when we were making the selection, when they found out what he moved to afterwards. But they were suggesting maybe he ought to come down with samples next time he visits us. What we really appreciate in the public relations sequence, Kevin, for is he never got so big or felt like he was so important that he didn't have time to come back to Western and work with our students. We had him down about at least once a year to speak to the students. He took all the time in the world to work with them. And he had one piece of advice for them, and that was always get involved. And he exemplified that when he went into the Louisville market. He went up there and was working in all sorts of committee work, got involved in the Public Relations Society of America up there, and was the youngest president of the Bluegrass chapter of Public Relations Society in America. Kind of all the things we're looking for our students. And so that's why we picked Kevin Granger this year as our first award winner. And he was, as I said, is in Los Angeles and was unable to be here. And standing in for him is Paula Quinn, one of our faculty members.
It's an honor for me to accept the award on behalf of Kevin Granger, who I have known for 12 years. I met him in the very first class I ever taught at Western Kentucky University, which was newspaper feature writing and editorial writing. He was a wonderful student. I taught him how to write, and he taught me how to speak. Instead of Louisville, it was Louisville. And instead of you guys, y'all. So I had a wonderful conversation with Kevin again yesterday. We've kept in touch over the years. And he especially wanted me to share these words with you. Western certainly prepared me for the path that I have been on. I owe the development of my career to the professors and administrators of Western during the years that I was there. So on behalf of Kevin, thank you very much.
It strikes me at this point, since our speaker has not yet arrived, that maybe it would be good to take like a 10-minute break. And I think facilities are down both hallways, and people can stretch and then come back. And we will reassemble, and we'll call on Mr. Deere at that time to talk about how the Deere Memorial Scholarship got started. And then by that time, our speaker. So now.
Honk telling this story. Martha Deere was running for state legislature many years ago. And Martha's an independent person, and she got mad because the guy that was that was our legislator suddenly announced his retirement, and somehow or other his partner got the blessing. So one of the big moments in Martha's life was to slip up to Frankfort, Kentucky, and register as a candidate. And we went to the Norris Chapel Baptist Church, which was a black church. And a gentleman came up to me and said, "Dear, you're no good. You don't have any black people in your newspaper." And at that time, as is the case now, it was difficult to employ, honest to God, I'm telling you the truth, black people. So I don't think I was forced into this, and I don't want to blame this on Martha, but that's how this thing evolved. And Darrow Downing was very gracious, and I think we got $1,000 or so. And then Ann Deere Gavell, who was married to Joe Deere, Ann's went to Birmingham Southern. She's from Calera, Alabama, and she worked for the Reader's Digest for 18 years after her husband Joe died. Joe was famous, among other things, for introducing the ladies' bar at the National Press Club in Washington, where he was president. And Joe also did many fine and wonderful other things as well. So anyway, Ann was able to convince the Reader's Digest Foundation that this was a pretty good idea, so she gave a gift of $1,500, and they doubled it. And last night she called and said that she's giving a gift, and then her son, I call him Little Joe, and I'll tell you about him in a moment, they put their gift together, and the double winds out to be triple. So that thing was a kind of an engine that made this thing take off, and we got it up to $65,000 after scholarships. There have been 40 scholarships, and in a while I'll tell you there's some more interesting news about how this thing is going. Joe Deere is now, young Joe, is now Assistant Secretary of Labor in the Labor Department. And he is the most hated man in government. He's in charge of OSHA. And I talked to him last night, and he wanted to be here tonight, but he puts in he doesn't work 100 hours anymore. He works, the Republicans have backed off, and actually his budget has increased by 7%, which is an incredible victory, because there's actually, with all due respects, there's an Oklahoma congressman, and he isn't J.C. Watts, I'll tell you that, but there's some other guy in Oklahoma who doesn't like my nephew, and someday we'll come to terms with that guy. But Joe's budget is up. The story of OSHA is that it's 50%, there have been a 50% reduction in fatalities in the world of construction, and OSHA was launched during the Nixon administration. It's interesting. He says about this scholarship program that the whole aspect of journalism is so important to a free society. And this fund expands the opportunity for talented young people to enter this field of journalism, and it is also a great honor to his father. And, you know, it's kind of exciting that Joe Deere is a very substantial donor for this program, and he's made a pledge for the next 5 years, whether Clinton wins or loses. There's some other, I want to talk about the no-shows. Now, somebody mentioned a while ago about somebody had to go to a wedding or something, and we have a famous Western Kentuckian, a Western graduate by the name of Henry Stone. And Henry, would you please stand up, but he's not here. And he has some cockamamie excuse about having to be best man. And this is true, Mayor. He has a best man at a wedding of Richard Upton, I believe the gentleman's name, who works for WFKM, our flagship radio station in Western Kentucky with 250 watts, 12:20 a.m. on your dial. 12:20, and it's also at night, too. And Henry is best man for Richard Upton. I said, well, doesn't Richard have a few years? Richard's, moving on towards his maturity, don't you know? And I said, how many times has Richard been married? Henry's standing for him for best man. He said, well, he's been married 5 times. So that's why Henry's not here, and it'll cost him plenty for him not to show him tonight. But Henry is a booster of this program. Attorney Ron Sheffer, who's a regent, who's a trustee of Regent, is that right, Howard? Of Western Kentucky, and a Henderson County gentleman. By golly, here comes our featured speaker. Won't you please welcome Tommy George? Yeah. Come up here, Mr. Oh, no, wait a minute. Hi, Tommy. Yeah. Sit down and rest your bones for just a minute, please, sir. There's the Black History Group of Henderson, thanks to Dorothy Black and Thomas Platt, have made a very significant gift, and it's very precious for this program. And they've got a lot of other demands on their money and time, so we appreciate that. Scripps Howard has been a significant giver. The Scripps Howard Foundation, the Lexington and the Louisville newspapers, and I understand the Owensboro newspaper may be participating. We've got, I think the significance about this program is that we now have about 50 new folks who have contributed. Anybody that bought a meal tonight, a meal ticket, a portion of those monies goes to the scholarship program. But I'm not going to tell you the total results. Do you want to come up here for just a minute, please, sir? Come on up here. Now, this is another thrill of my life. I tell you, I've met Jim McDaniel. You've missed him. He said a prayer for you. And yes, sir. Yes, I'm Walt Deere, and I'm tickled to death to meet you, man. I pay $4 every Sunday to read this guy's stuff. He is the national correspondent for the New York Times, and he covers the National Football League, and he is one fine, talented writer. And he's the man behind the words. Let me just tell you a little bit about Thomas George III. He hails from Paducah, Kentucky. He graduated from Paducah Tillman. He first got interested in journalism and wrote. Steve Austin and Ron Jenkins are old sports editors, young sports editors, old sports editors. These two guys here are sports buffs. And Tommy would write on a brown paper bag. Is that really true? Oh, well, come here for a minute. How did you do that? I mean, a brown paper bag?
Well,
was it a big bag or a little bag?
Actually, what happened was the first story that I had ever had published, I went to write it and didn't have any paper at home. So I just ripped that brown paper bag that's usually groceries in and wrote on the front, wrote on the back, then took it in the next day and typed it up when I was actually in class. So that's what happened.
Now you use a laptop?
Now I got one.
Yeah,
nice
okay,
one. Yeah.
Okay. He's been to Ball State. I think of what's kind of interesting, when he was working at the Herald at Western Kentucky University, when he was, let's see, do you know this guy, Gary Harrelson? Would you come up here for just a minute, Gary? Yeah. Where is Gary? Oh, over here. Yeah. Gary. And Mr. Hines, would you come up here for just a minute? Perry Hines, yeah. And I know we've got just a minute. It's Tommy's fault, he was late. Are we going to these scholars? Yes.
These are in school, these are here,
Yeah.
all the checks.
And is Toya Richards here? Would you come up here for just a minute, please? Yes. And Nikita's not here tonight. Yeah, Nikita Stewart, would you come up here? Oh, she's all right. Are the students here tonight? Risa Brim and Karen Brown and Latoya Bias and Courtney Davis and Rochelle Davis. Would you all just come up here for a minute, please? And Alana Reed, she's not here. William Roundtree is here. I know that. I met him a while ago. William, are you still here? Yes, sir. And Darren Simmons. Is Darren here? You all come up here, please. And now, just a minute. These are current students, and these are the alumni. Yeah, please, won't you give a warm hand of applause? Now, just a couple other items about Tommy's career. He was president of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, and last later a national leader in the fraternity. He's served on the Detroit Free Press, where he worked for 4.5 years before he went to work for the New York Times. He's been honored by the National Association of Black Journalists for the best sports story of the year, been a frequent speaker at seminars, and every summer without fail he comes back to summer to lead an intern program, which is very, very precious. I just want to say one more word about our family's involvement. My daughter Jenny is a PhD in English at Fort Lewis College in Colorado, in Durango, where she teaches, among other things, journalism. Jenny Deere and Elizabeth Deere and Brian Deere are participants in this scholarship fund, and I'm a little proud of that, you know, and they're very much aware of this program. Now, I want you all to return and let Tommy speak, because he's been trying hard to get here. Tommy, have a go.
Well, they say that all things that are worth anything don't come easily, and I can attest to that tonight. Just a few hours ago, I was sitting in the airport in Miami wondering, hoping, wishing, praying that I could get here. And because of Jimmy Johnson, I'm late, because I was waiting on Jimmy and had everything set up for an 11 o'clock interview, which he had agreed to. And he didn't show up until 1. And the flight was at 1:30. So we got pushed back, and everybody, it seemed, was traveling from Miami today, going everywhere, so everything was totally backed up. They got me on a 4 o'clock flight where I was a standby passenger after already having missed the 2 that they had me as a standby on because I couldn't get on that one. And they allowed 9 people standby to get on that 4 o'clock flight, and I was the 9th one. So you're really looking at a miracle here. Greetings to all of our special guests and to the Western students current and to those past. And it's been a road to travel here. I was down in Miami because Miami plays the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday in a big feud of a game. It's Jimmy Johnson against Jerry Jones. The two once worked together very closely, building something special in Dallas, and now they go at each other just like this. And interestingly enough, I had already talked to Jerry Jones early in the morning, and then I got Jimmy Johnson later this afternoon, and the two back-to-back, the intensity is just incredible, and the feud is so long that and has so much distance to it that it even affected us here, as we can see. But it's a great opportunity and a blessing indeed to be here. And I have always found that whenever I'm at any type of occasion where I have something special to share, like here tonight, and on those rare occasions where I can have someone from my family, because I do have a very wonderful gift of family, and I'm sure all of you who are here with your families have love and respect and cherish them, and I want you to know that I have that same zest and love for my family. From Nashville, LaToya. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to talk a few minutes about diversity in the newsroom, and specifically minorities in the newsroom and the importance of that. I did grow up in Paducah, and Paducah was a town relatively of blacks and whites. There weren't a lot of other races, nationalities in that town. I came to Western, and then I saw that the world was indeed, in terms of color, a little wider, because here at Western, I saw other nationalities. And then my first internship was at the Nashville Banner in Nashville, Tennessee, and I saw a little more. And then I traveled to Richmond, Virginia, to the Richmond Times-Dispatch for my second internship, and then going to the East Coast, I saw that the world had a lot more color. And then I began my career at Detroit, at the Detroit Free Press, and finally have been in New York for the last 6, 7, 8 years.
And I tell you that if you want diversity, you certainly find it in New York. The people, the communities, the Asian American, the Indian, the Mexican, the white, African, the Hispanic. New York is like the world. It is a mosaic of all of us, and it is a puzzle of colors and attitudes and customs and beliefs all boiled into one large, huge pot. And if we are about providing the best service in our newspapers and in this industry, our newsroom must be reflective of this mosaic and of this puzzle. We must seek minority input, minority reporters and photographers and editors and publishers and, yes, owners. We must encourage our youth in a very trying and taxing and challenging field to stay the course in journalism and to see the benefits and wisdom of a journalism career. That last point about encouraging our youth and asking them to remain in this career and remain focused is a very important point, because I have experienced it. I have experienced those moments and those times where I wasn't sure that staying in this career. It started very early. My first day was a day where I was one other black on the staff, and it was a staff of about 35 students. And the lighting board was up, and people were posting up materials for the next day's hurl. And I was walking by, just trying to take it all in, because coming from Paducah and Paducah-Tillman, we had a great of high school journalism, but coming to Western, I saw it to be 2-3 times the size, 2-3 times the operation, 2 and 3 times some of the talent. And so I was really wide-eyed and eager for this field and for this opportunity. And I'm walking by the lighting board, and there were 2 young ladies at the end. And as I walk past, I hear one of them say to the other one, "Who's that guy? Who's that guy? Who's that guy? He's new. Who's that guy?" And so I heard it, and I looked back, but I just kind of kept it within, because one, I guess it was my first day. I realized that I was much more than a token, and there was no need in telling them, just show them. Once I got at the time, and in the locker room afterwards, we were seeking Darnell Cole. He had a great game and had knocked in a winning run and played some great defense. Seattle locker room, myself, about 8 other reporters in front of the locker room. The guys are all getting. Other guys thought. Because the pitcher, as a pitcher, he needed holes, and he figured since he had to be working in the locker room as a boy. Well, I always have great respect for Dick Williams, because Dick Williams saw this whole scene, and as manager of his team, he called Lee Gutterman into his office. "Lee, come in here." Closed the door, and I tell you, you could hear what sounded like a volcano going off in that locker, in that coach. And I'm sure that if Lee Gutterman was a Cy Young runner and had 30 wins, this wouldn't have happened the next day, but the next day he was actually cut. So I guess he had been struggling, as it were, and then for Dick Williams, that was the final straw. We need minorities in the newsroom, and we need them for a lot of. I saw this early on in my first year in Detroit with a columnist, Charlie Vincent. Charlie came from Texas, and he was writing about Billy Sims, a running back from the Lions, who had signed 2 contracts to play in 2 different leagues, one with the Houston Gamblers of the USFL at the time, and one with the Lions. And so Charlie was talking about how Billy Sims was in court and how he had these 2 opportunities, and boy, he's a lucky guy, and you know, he's just really ought to be grateful because he could be back in Texas picking cotton. And that's what Charlie wrote. And the phones rang off the hook the next day at the Detroit Free Press, and Charlie Vincent could not understand what the big deal was. He says, I grew up in Texas. I picked cotton when I was a kid. That's what we did down there. That's how you made a living. But for many African Americans, and particularly in Detroit, it was a very, very sensitive matter, a sensitive subject handled without sensitivity. And if there had been minority representation at one of those editors' meetings, maybe that does not happen. I'm very proud of my association with the New York Times because we have a staff of 35 writers in sports, and we have 7 black sports writers. Those writers include Cliff Brown, who is an NBA national writer, Bill Rhoden, who's a columnist, one of the few black columnists in America, sports columnist, Claire Smith, who is a female and a black who happens to be a national baseball writer, Mike Freeman, who covers the Giants, which is probably the biggest single beat in New York, Tim Smith and myself cover national pro football, and George Willis covers the Mets. Now, I don't like the number 7 out of 35. We could do better there. But the 7 that we have are not shuffling papers somewhere back off in the supply room. Compare that to the situation in Minnesota at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune and at the St. Paul Pioneer Dispatch, where a group of maybe 10, 15 writers on a daily basis cover the Minnesota Vikings, who happen to have one of the few black head coaches in the league, Denny Green. And yet not one of those writers is black. And not only is that the case, but there's only one black sports writer, period, at either one of those 2 papers. And Denny Green has talked to me about that many, many times, how he feels like everyone's just out to get him, and how he feels like the wagons are always circled on him, and that how he feels he has to go to radio oftentimes instead of print to get what he feels is really a fair share. We need minorities in the newsroom for 5 primary reasons. 1, for a better overall product. 2, for a more entertaining product. 3, for a more enlightening product. 4, for a symbol and an accurate one of fairness. And 5, we need them because that is what newspapers are, representative of us all, and we all should be included. When I first came to the NFL, there were a lot of white millionaire owners who looked at me and had no trust for me whatsoever. When I covered a little bit of college football, there was a situation once where I met Lou Holtz for the first time, and Lou was coaching at Minneapolis in Minnesota at the University of Minnesota. And so I walk in, and all he knows is to spend some time with him, quality time, to write about him as a coach. So as I walk in, Lou is turned with his back to the door, sitting in his chair, working at something on the table. And I walk in the door, and Lou Holtz is sitting there, and I tap on the door. He goes, "You must be Thomas." And he just stopped right there. "George," he says, "well," he says, "you're one of the best sports writers I've ever seen." I said, "Yeah, and I'm probably one of the darkest ones you've ever seen too, right? Huh?" And he said, "Oh, you got me." And Lou and I have been very good friends ever since then. But, the players in the NFL, it's 67% black, and for the players, it's an eye-opening experience when a black reporter works with them, a minority reporter. They like it. So for me, as has always been the case, I approach my job with players come first, because I think the players and the fans. And I found that through working through that way, as well as building relationships, that the color of my skin was not a barrier for me working with white millionaire owners. It was not a barrier for me working with white coaches. It is not a barrier for me working with people because I have found that it's only an excuse when you use your color as a situation where you cannot advance. I tell students all the time about that if you work hard and that if you're prepared, you can overcome any of those obstacles that may lie ahead of you, particularly the one even of color. So to Walt, dear, I offer my sincere thanks for his support in the scholarship program. This is wonderful work. To those of you who have given to the scholarship fund, I thank you, and for those of you that can, I ask you to please do so. There is a place for minorities and for women and for black and for white and for handicapped and the blind and the impaired in other ways. There is a place for all of us in the newsroom. The day when our newspapers are reflected, and that is this industry will shine brightest. What a I thank you for allowing
I told you that we were up to $65,000, and as a result of this meeting tonight, we're up to $100,000. Thank you very much. And you and I are going to visit my friend Ed Lewis at Essence Magazine. Do you know Ed Lewis?
I think I have met him
Yes.
before.
Ed is the publisher of Essence Magazine, which has a circulation of 1 million, and it ranks 17th among black-owned black-owned industries in the whole United States. And I want you and me to make a courtesy call and get it. Yeah. And then we want Ed to come down here and tell the story. Have you ever met him?
I think I've met him before,
right.
but I don't know.
And I want you to remember that Perry Hines. Perry, would you stand up for just one more minute? Yeah. Perry is a recipient of the scholarship, and he made a personal gift, and the firm that he's associated with matched it. And thank you very much, Perry. It's very important. So one other thing, the reason that white publications did not hire black journalists in the years gone by is that there weren't any to speak of, and maybe they never got the opportunity. So the whole purpose of this program is to provide a core of talented young people who will now have an opportunity to get jobs, and the need continues to be great. Isn't that right?
Very much so.
Yeah. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for putting up with Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones and getting up here tonight to be with us. Thanks a lot.
For having me. I appreciate it.
Very much.
We thank you all for coming.